I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw my water bill, $386. For 1 month. I live alone. I don't have a garden. I don't even have a leaky faucet. The last time my bill was this high, I'd accidentally left the hose on for a week watering a dead plant. So naturally, I assumed it had to be a mistake. But the next month came, and the bill was even higher. Then I noticed something strange. Every morning around 6 a.m., I'd hear a deep gurgling noise coming from under my driveway. Not near my kitchen or my bathroom, under the actual concrete. At first I thought I was losing it, until the day I followed the sound to my side fence and realized what was really going on. Karen, my neighbor. Somehow, she had rerouted her new pool's plumbing into my private water line. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she looked me dead in the eyes, laughed, and said, "Well, if you didn't want to share, maybe you should have lived somewhere more exclusive." It all started innocently enough. A few weeks back, there were construction noises coming from Karen's backyard. That wasn't unusual. Karen always had some kind of vanity project going on. Last summer it was a koi pond, which promptly became a mosquito swamp. The winter before that, it was a patio heater that she forgot to turn off and set her own fence on fire. But this time, the sounds were louder, more industrial. Sawing, drilling, the beep-beep of reversing trucks. I'd asked her about it once, and she simply rolled her eyes and said, "Nothing that concerns renters." Which was funny because I own my home. She's the renter. But Karen had a habit of treating everyone else like they were beneath her, especially since she got cozy with the HOA president, Sharon, who seemed to approve anything Karen wanted without so much as a signature. It wasn't until Saturday morning that I found out what all the fuss was about. I stepped outside to grab the paper when I heard splashing, followed by what sounded like laughter and clinking glasses. I peered over my side fence and nearly dropped the paper. There, gleaming in the sun like something from a celebrity mansion, was a brand-new, full-sized, in-ground pool. It had deck chairs, floating swans, and Karen lounging on a bright red recliner with a mimosa in hand. Around her stood a circle of HOA members, some in swimsuits, others fully dressed but with champagne flutes. A DJ booth was being set up in the corner. My jaw must have been on the ground, because Karen noticed me and gave a half-smile. Not a friendly smile. The kind that said she knew exactly what she was doing. I tried to be civil. I asked, "Hey Karen, nice pool. Just wondering how you got the permit for that so fast." She didn't miss a beat. She looked at me, took a slow sip from her glass, and said, "Oh, Sharon took care of it. We moved some things around. Nothing you'd understand." Then she turned her back to me and continued posing for what looked like a pool-themed photoshoot with her golden retriever in matching sunglasses. Something felt off. Pools don't just appear in 2 weeks. And there had been no visible water tanks or piping equipment brought in. My curiosity turned to concern. That evening, I checked my water meter. It was running fast. Despite no faucets, no dishwasher, and nothing running inside. I turned off the main valve, waited, turned it back on. Still spinning. That's when I realized something had to be wrong underground. The next day, I called in a favor from my old college friend Joey, who's now a licensed plumber. He brought his equipment and did a full scan. What we found made my stomach turn. Karen's pool pump was hooked into my private water main. Not city lines. Not shared HOA plumbing. My line. There was a hidden trench that had been filled in with decorative rocks along the side yard, perfectly aligned with my outdoor line and her pump system. Joey showed me where the pipe was tapped. He recorded everything, zoomed in on the junction, and showed me how whoever did it used industrial-grade sealant to mask the connection. This wasn't some amateur DIY project. Someone paid professionals to steal my water and bury the evidence. I confronted Karen the next morning. I waited until she was outside pretending to garden in her sundress and straw hat, sipping lemon water like she was Martha Stewart. I laid it out calmly. Told her I knew about the pipe, showed her the evidence. Her face didn't even twitch. She took off her sunglasses, blinked, and said, "You should be honored. Not everyone gets to host luxury plumbing." Then she walked back inside like she'd just complimented my lawn. I stood there, stunned. Not just at the theft, but at the sheer arrogance of it. I marched straight to the HOA office, documents in hand. But as soon as I walked in, I knew it was a setup. Sharon was there, flipping through a magazine, and when I explained the situation, she barely looked up. "Sounds like a neighborly misunderstanding," she said. Then added, "I'm sure if you wanted compensation, Karen would be happy to share some leftover wine." I demanded an investigation, but Sharon told me there was no formal complaint process for water disputes between neighbors. No proof that it wasn't a mutual agreement. She even insinuated that maybe I'd allowed it and was now backing out to cause trouble. The gaslighting was next level. I walked out of there fuming. And to make things worse, I got a notice on my door the next morning, an HOA citation for suspicious construction activity near my water line. Karen had turned the tables and filed a complaint against me for tampering with community utilities. I was now being fined $100 per day until I could prove my innocence. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a narcissistic neighbor. I was dealing with a coordinated power play. Karen had the HOA in her pocket, and I was the only one standing in her way. The final straw came when I received a permit request in my mailbox. Karen had submitted plans to extend her pool deck and patio, right up to the edge of my foundation. The permit included what looked like a digital signature. Mine. Forged. She was literally building over my legal property and making it look like I agreed. I couldn't sleep that night. My head spun with rage, disbelief, and helplessness. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, that helplessness turned to resolve. If Karen wanted to make this war about water, then I was going to hit her where it hurt. Not with lawyers. Not with HOA appeals. With something a little more direct. A little more poetic. And a whole lot messier than a court ruling. Because what Karen didn't know is that I design system flows for a living. I work in infrastructure logistics. I design network reroutes and emergency backup grids for a major data center. Pipes, valves, and rerouting systems are second nature to me. If she wanted to steal from me, she should have picked someone who didn't know how to turn the tables. Because come her big HOA pool party in 2 weeks, she wasn't just going to be swimming in my water anymore. She was going to be swimming in something else entirely. Joey showed up the next morning with his toolbox, blueprints, and a face full of questions. He'd been thinking about the illegal junction all night, just like I had. As he knelt beside the camouflage trench on my side yard, he whistled low and muttered, "Whoever did this knew what they were doing." He wasn't wrong. The piping was perfectly aligned, sealed like a pro job, and buried beneath a layer of decorative stone that blended in so well it could have passed inspection, if anyone from the HOA had actually bothered to inspect. But that wasn't the most infuriating part. The real kicker was when Joey traced the pipe's origin and discovered that Karen hadn't just tapped into my line, she'd installed a pressure boost pump on her end. Meaning, not only was she stealing my water, but she was controlling the flow and speed of it, making my water bills spike even higher. I couldn't believe it. My own neighbor had turned my house into a private reservoir for her pool, and the HOA refused to even acknowledge it. Joey, ever the tech junkie, suggested we document everything. He hooked up a snake camera and filmed the entire setup. He narrated as he went, explaining each fitting, the illegal junction, the use of backflow preventers, and the total theft of pressure from my side. We even did a live meter test to show that as soon as Karen's pool pump kicked on, my water meter spun like a roulette wheel on a sugar high. It was rock-solid evidence, undeniable and clear. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time the HOA would have no choice but to take action. We marched back to the HOA office, this time with Joey at my side and the video queued up on his tablet. Sharon wasn't alone this time. 2 other board members were present. Martin, a timid guy who always looked like he was about to apologize for something, and Denise, a retired teacher who usually acted like HOA meetings were book club discussions. I laid it all out, pressed play, and waited. The room was silent as Joey narrated the footage, showing every illegal connection in detail. When the video ended, Martin cleared his throat and said, "Well, that's informative." Denise mumbled something about needing to verify the footage's authenticity. Sharon simply leaned back in her chair and said, "Anyone can fake a video these days." Then she added, with a smirk, "Maybe you should have come to us before accusing your neighbor of theft." I was stunned. They were doubling down, denying evidence, acting like I was the criminal. When I asked what steps they would take to verify the footage, Sharon said they'd be consulting their legal counsel. Which, of course, meant nothing would happen. Not now. Not ever. That's when Karen herself walked into the office, sunglasses perched on her head like she was stepping onto a fashion runway. She didn't even look surprised to see us. She walked right up to the counter and said, "Oh, I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to drop off my guest list for the HOA Summer Splash. Over 200 RSVPs so far. Hope the board is ready for the best party this community's ever seen." Then she looked at me, winked, and added, "Bring a swimsuit if you dare." Joey clenched his jaw so hard I thought his molars might crack. I had to physically hold him back. Karen turned and walked out without another word. Sharon acted like nothing happened. The meeting ended, and we were left with nothing but cold stares and a polite reminder to keep things neighborly. That night, I sat in my living room, going over the footage again and again. Joey was pacing the floor, muttering about violations, lawsuits, and whether or not we could get the media involved. But I had a different idea. Legal routes wouldn't work. The HOA was too corrupt, too deeply entangled with Karen's little social empire. What we needed wasn't a lawsuit. We needed leverage. And I had just the tool. Years ago, before I moved to this neighborhood, I'd worked on a project involving emergency bypass systems for utility grid. One of the properties we serviced had an old septic system that had been decommissioned but never fully dismantled. The underground piping was sealed off, yes, but not disconnected. Just rerouted. And one of those lines, I realized with a jolt, ran directly beneath the backyards on our street. Including mine. And Karen's. I called Joey over and explained my idea. His eyes widened. He said, "You want to redirect it into her pool? Are you out of your mind?" "No," I said. "I want to give her a taste of what it feels like to be on the wrong end of an invisible system. I want her to realize that not everything she steals stays clean forever." Joey hesitated, then said, "You realize this could backfire, right? If anything goes wrong, we're the ones who'll be blamed." I told him I'd take full responsibility. But he was already thinking, already drawing out plans on a napkin. He couldn't help himself. Engineering chaos was his favorite hobby, and this was the ultimate playground. The next few days were a blur. While Karen hosted pre-party planning sessions with her clique, Joey and I got to work. We dug carefully, using cover tools and working only at night. We accessed the bypass line and verified that it still had minor residual flow, not enough to be dangerous, but more than enough to make a statement. Then we installed a three-way valve system, complete with a remote actuator. Joey added a failsafe shutoff and a pressure control module to ensure nothing burst or caused damage. Everything was timed, precise, and controlled. The idea wasn't to poison or destroy. We weren't monsters. We just wanted to reroute a low-pressure stream into her pool for a few minutes. Enough to cause a smell. A visual cue. Enough to ruin the party and expose the theft in the most public, humiliating way possible. We also installed a backup camera system in my attic, aimed at Karen's pool, ready to record the exact moment of chaos. It was both petty and brilliant. The day before the party, Karen held a final walkthrough with the event team. She strutted around her backyard in a white summer dress, barking orders and telling the DJ where to place his speakers. I watched from my window as she showed off her pool, bragging about how she'd created an oasis in the middle of the suburbs. Meanwhile, beneath her fake paradise, our little device waited, patient, silent, and ready. Joey double-checked the systems. Everything worked. The valve responded to the remote perfectly. The only thing left was timing. Karen's summer splash was scheduled for Saturday at noon. The guest list included HOA board members, social influencers, even a local city council member's wife. Karen had rented lighting, canopies, and even a photo booth. She was calling it the event of the season. I called it the perfect opportunity. That night, Joey and I sat on my porch, eating pizza and watching the pool lights flicker in her yard. He raised his soda can and said, "To poetic justice." I raised mine and said, "To sewage with style." It was risky. It was bold. But it was also completely deserved. Karen had manipulated the HOA, forged signatures, stolen resources, and then dared to throw a party in my face. She thought she was untouchable. Untouchable people never look down. But when the switch flipped and the first stream of foul-smelling water started to change the color of her pristine pool, the look on her face was going to be worth every sleepless night. All we had to do was wait. One push of a button. One flush of karma. And the Queen of Clean would be swimming in her own consequences. The morning of Karen's party arrived with the kind of blue sky that made people believe everything was perfect. The sun was high, the birds were chirping, and from my kitchen window, I could already see vendors unloading cases of champagne and crates of pre-inflated pool toys in the shape of flamingos and giant glitter donut. Karen was in full command mode, strutting around her yard in designer sandals and a sun hat that looked like it was borrowed from a travel magazine. She wasn't just hosting a party, she was staging a performance. Every movement, every command to the caterers or decorators, was delivered with the air of royalty. This wasn't a neighborhood event, it was her coronation. And she was absolutely clueless about the countdown ticking just below the surface. Joey arrived around 9 a.m., disguised as a delivery guy. He brought a cooler and an envelope, the envelope containing our backup plan and the cooler full of soda cans to keep up appearances. We didn't need to do much now. The system was fully set, cameras were recording, and the actuator for the sewage valve was live. We ran a final test, quietly from my living room where the command tablet was hidden beneath a stack of newspapers. The response time was perfect. 3 seconds from button press to flow shift. That was all we needed. Karen's party started at noon. The real show would begin shortly after the first round of cannonball jumps and synchronized champagne selfies. I spent the morning pretending to mow my lawn. It was the best cover I could come up with for staying close while observing the chaos unfold. Every so often I would glance over the fence and spot a new arrival, HOA board members dressed to impress, several Instagrammers Karen had clearly invited for exposure, and even Sharon, who arrived with a small entourage and a smug look that said she already considered this party a political win. The whole event felt like a twisted parade of entitlement, every one of them benefiting from lies, cover-ups, and the stolen water running below their feet. Joey kept a low profile in my garage, sipping a soda and monitoring the footage from our attic cameras. Everything was being captured in high definition. The floats, the faces, the dancing, the drink. It was a masterpiece in the making. At 12:30 p.m., Karen clinked her mimosa glass against the side of a microphone and stepped onto a makeshift stage set up near the pool. She was glowing, not just from the sun but from sheer self-satisfaction. She raised her glass and launched into a speech about community values, empowerment through hospitality, and how the HOA stood for more than just rules, it stood for beauty. I nearly gagged on my own orange juice. She ended her speech with a dramatic flourish, inviting everyone to take a dip in the pool and let go of the stress of everyday life. The crowd erupted into applause, and the first wave of guests began making their way into the water. The surface rippled with movement, laughter, and the occasional shriek of cold toes touching lukewarm water. That was our cue. I stepped inside, nodded at Joey, and said, "It's time." He hovered his finger over the trigger like it was a nuclear launch. "You ready for this?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. Let it flow. He tapped the screen. 3 seconds later, the switch flipped. The pump system rerouted the underground connection, cutting the clean water and redirecting the flow from the old septic bypass line. It wasn't raw sewage. That would have been a biohazard, but it was foul, dark, and unmistakably contaminated. It had a smell that crept slowly into the air like a creeping fog. At first, no one noticed. The music was too loud, the laughter too high. Then one of the inflatable flamingos began to drift toward the shallow end, trailing a brownish tint in its wake. The first scream came from a little girl who thought it was mud. Her mother reached down, scooped a handful of the water, sniffed it, and promptly turned green. Chaos didn't hit like an explosion. It started like a ripple, then grew into a wave. People began looking around, sniffing the air, questioning why the water suddenly smelled like a swamp. The DJ faltered mid-beat. Karen, still mid-toast, paused and looked toward the pool, confused by the mass exodus of her guests scrambling to get out. Then the smell fully hit. It wasn't just foul, it was revolting. People began gagging. One woman ran into the house crying. Someone knocked over a catering table in the panic, sending shrimp cocktail flying across the grass. Karen's face shifted from confusion to horror in a matter of seconds. She stormed toward the pump station, trying to understand what had happened. Then someone yelled, "Is this sewage? Oh my God, it's sewage!" Phones were up. People were recording. A group of influencers live-streamed the entire meltdown. Karen shouted over the noise, demanding everyone stay calm, but the guests weren't having it. A toddler threw up in the corner. One man slipped trying to climb out of the pool and dragged a beach umbrella down with him. And then, as if on cue, the health inspector arrived. He had been tipped off anonymously, of course, but the timing was so perfect it was almost theatrical. He stepped into the backyard, mask on his face, clipboard in hand, and took one long look at the pool before announcing, "We've had reports of contamination. This party is officially shut down." Karen tried to argue, her voice cracking, her face pale, but the inspector cut her off. "We've found unauthorized piping leading into this structure. This pool is not connected to the city water system. You are under investigation for illegal utility tampering and code violations." He didn't even finish his sentence before people started fleeing like it was a sinking ship. Sharon tried to backpedal, pretending she had no knowledge of Karen's pool setup. Karen, furious and flailing, turned on everyone. She blamed the contractors, the plumbers, even me. She pointed over the fence and screamed, "He did this. He sabotaged me. He's jealous." The inspector looked over at me. I gave a small wave from my porch and sipped my soda. He didn't say a word, but I could see the hint of a smirk behind his mask. Karen's meltdown reached opera-level proportions. She ranted, cried, demanded to speak to someone in charge. Then the news crew arrived. They hadn't been invited, but they'd caught wind of a major disruption at an HOA event and smelled ratings. The footage they captured included shots of the brown pool water, sobbing partygoers, and Karen screaming into a phone, her hat now lopsided and soaked. It was the kind of visual that made national news in less than 24 hours. Karen, once the queen of clean, was now the sewage lady. Her image, screaming in the background while someone held up a sludge-soaked floaty, went viral on nearly every social media platform. Joey and I watched the entire spectacle from my living room. He kept rewinding the footage, replaying the exact moment Karen realized her empire was crumbling. I sat in silence, absorbing it all. The laughter, the screams, the poetic reversal of fortunes. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I'd made a point. You don't steal from your neighbors, lie, and expect to float through life untouched. Sometimes the system bites back. And in Karen's case, it left a permanent stain. The kind that chlorinated water can't wash away. By the next morning, it felt like the entire city had seen Karen's meltdown. The footage had gone viral in record time. Several different angles of her screaming, slipping, and trying to command people out of panic were being reposted with titles like "Karen's Luxury Pool Becomes a Toxic Wasteland" and entitled "HOA Queen Gets Flushed in Front of Her Guests." One clip had over 200,000 views by sunrise. Even local news ran a segment, trying to keep it professional, but the anchor could barely hold a straight face when quoting the health inspector. The phrase "unregulated sewage intrusion" became a punchline on late-night radio. I'd never seen a reputation disintegrate so quickly, and I've worked in corporate sabotage. Karen, however, was not taking it silently. At around 10 in the morning, her front door slammed open with the force of a soap opera scene, and she stormed across her lawn in oversized sunglasses, holding a clipboard and her phone pressed to her ear. I stayed in my house, watching through the blinds as she paced back and forth in her driveway, yelling at someone, most likely Sharon or whatever lawyer she'd found who was still willing to answer her calls. Her hair was tied up hastily, her blouse was wrinkled, and she had on the same shoes she wore during the party, now completely ruined. She looked like she hadn't slept, which made two of us, except I was wide awake with satisfaction. A few hours later, I received an email from a local blogger who specialized in HOA corruption stories. Apparently, someone had leaked not just the pool sabotage footage, but the internal permits and reports I had collected regarding Karen's illegal water tap. They asked if I wanted to go on record. I declined the interview but sent them all the video evidence anonymously. The blogger posted a full exposé that same evening, detailing how Karen had been funneling stolen water from my property into her luxury pool and how the HOA board had ignored or dismissed multiple complaints. The article didn't hold back, calling out Sharon by name and linking to her previous financial misconduct at another HOA a few years ago. The comments section exploded with residents from our own community chiming in, most of them furious, embarrassed, and ready for blood. By nightfall, the real fallout began. First came the emergency HOA meeting, held in the clubhouse with chairs hastily arranged like a war council. I wasn't invited, but Joey and I sat in his truck nearby, watching as people filtered in. Sharon arrived looking like she had aged 10 years. Karen showed up late, visibly flustered, and tried to keep her chin up, but it was clear she was no longer in control. About an hour in, voices started rising inside. A neighbor who'd been at the party stormed out, saying loud enough for us to hear, "She nearly made my kid swim in sewage," and then acted like it was sparkling water. More people followed, some shaking their heads, others openly angry. Apparently, one of the residents had printed out screenshots from the news footage and taped them to the HOA bulletin board with captions. My favorite was the one with Karen mid-yell, mouth open, hair a mess, floating in the background with the words "The Queen has fallen" underneath. The damage wasn't just social, it was legal. The health inspector had issued an official citation. The city was involved now. Karen's pool had to be professionally drained, chemically treated, and re-inspected before it could even be refilled. Not only that, but her permit had been suspended pending further review, and there was talk of charging her with illegal water diversion. That meant not only fines, but possible restitution to the utility board, and me. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my door. A formal apology from the HOA board. Sharon had resigned. Karen had been temporarily removed from all HOA-related activities. They were launching an internal audit, and they would no longer be pursuing the complaint Karen had filed against me for tampering. In fact, the board was now investigating how her piping had ever been installed without oversight. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a folder marked Revenge Documentation. Karen, though, wasn't ready to give up. She tried to pivot, turning herself into a victim. She posted a lengthy rant on the neighborhood app, claiming that she was the target of a coordinated smear campaign, that someone had deliberately sabotaged her pool out of jealousy, and she was going to find out who did it. She even suggested that certain neighbors had a deep resentment toward successful women. The replies were instant and brutal. One resident replied, "You mean the neighbor whose water you stole?" Another simply posted a meme of a brown-tinted pool float and said, "Achievement unlocked. Queen of the Septic Kingdom." Within hours, Karen deleted her post and temporarily deactivated her account. But things didn't stop there. The HOA, desperate to repair its image, held a town meeting the following weekend. This time, everyone was invited. The clubhouse was packed. Residents demanded accountability, reforms, and for Karen to be held financially responsible. The new interim president, an older retired contractor named Mike, stood up and read a statement. It included a full acknowledgement of the illegal pool hookup, a list of HOA rule violations committed by Karen, and a notice that she would be fined per day until her plumbing was disconnected and restored to legal status. On top of that, a motion was introduced to ban her from holding any future events on the property for a full year. The motion passed almost unanimously. When I stepped outside later that night, I saw Karen's backyard crew starting to dismantle parts of the pool deck. The lights were off, the furniture had been moved into a pile, and the once pristine pool now looked like a forgotten ditch. Karen stood by the gate, arms crossed, glaring at the workers as if sheer willpower could make the nightmare end. She spotted me, and for a moment our eyes met. But she didn't say anything. No threats, no insults. Just a tired, bitter look, like someone who realized too late that entitlement doesn't come with immunity. That weekend, Joey and I went out for barbecue to celebrate. He brought his laptop and replayed the footage again while we ate ribs and laughed until we cried. I told him I'd never planned to escalate it this far, but he shook his head and said, "She escalated it the second she stole from you and thought you'd stay quiet. You just gave her exactly what she deserved, with precision." And he was right. I hadn't wanted war. I wanted peace. But when peace was drained out of my pipes without permission, war became necessary. And with a little engineering, a lot of patience, and the right amount of sewage, justice had found its way back. Karen stopped showing up at community events after that. Word spread that she was considering moving. Some said she'd been banned from multiple neighborhood apps. Others claimed she was trying to rebrand her image by starting a clean living blog. But it was too late. The footage was out there, permanent, shared in group chats, used in HOA training videos, even remixed into a TikTok dance challenge. Her legacy wasn't one of elegance and power. It was chlorine and karma. Weeks had passed since the infamous pool disaster, but the ripple effects were still visible across the neighborhood. Karen's once immaculate backyard was now a hollow shell of its former glory. The pool had been drained and cordoned off with caution tape by city authorities. The deck chairs were gone, the outdoor lights dismantled, and a once vibrant garden had withered under the summer heat, neglected and forgotten. No more late-night DJ beats, no more HOA-sponsored brunches. The only sound now drifting from her property was the occasional grunt of a contractor removing what remained of her grand vision. It was poetic in a way. Her empire, which she'd built on stolen resources and entitlement, was now being unbuilt piece by piece in public view. Karen herself had become a ghost. She rarely emerged from the house, and when she did, it was early morning or late evening, always with sunglasses, always with a tight-lipped expression. The woman who once flaunted every minor accomplishment like a royal decree now avoided eye contact with anyone who passed. No more updates about her influencer partnerships, no more HOA memos filled with her demands for uniform lawn ornaments. She was no longer the queen of the cul-de-sac. She was the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, the HOA had undergone a transformation. Under new leadership, the board began making amends with residents. They rescinded numerous Karen-era fines, started reviewing past complaints with genuine interest, and even hosted an open barbecue in the community park to apologize for previous mismanagement. I attended that event, mostly out of curiosity, and was surprised to find a genuine sense of unity among neighbors who had once been divided. People who had never spoken before were bonding over shared frustration with the old regime. I shook hands with residents I barely knew, exchanged laughs, and found myself at the center of far more conversations than I expected. Apparently, word of what I'd done had spread much further than I thought. Some approached me with a conspiratorial grin, whispering things like, "Was it really you?" And I'd pay to have seen her face when the water turned brown. One man even offered to buy me dinner in exchange for the full story. I didn't confirm or deny anything. I just smiled and told them that sometimes things fix themselves if you let the system flow naturally. It became an inside joke, flow naturally. Joey printed it on a t-shirt and gave it to me as a gag gift. I wore it once when mowing the lawn, and nearly every neighbor who saw it burst out laughing. But as much as the laughs and nods felt good, I wasn't interested in fame. I'd gotten what I wanted: accountability, justice, and a sense of peace restored. Still, I couldn't help but feel a certain unfinished tension lingering in the air. Karen, after all, had not apologized. Not once. Not publicly. Not privately. Not even when city inspectors confirmed she had diverted water illegally. Even when fined, even when shamed, she maintained her narrative, that she was the victim of jealousy, sabotage, and a neighborhood conspiracy. It was remarkable, in a tragic sort of way, how deeply she clung to the idea that everyone else was the problem. Then, unexpectedly, a letter arrived at my doorstep. It was hand-delivered, unmarked, just folded paper slipped into my doorframe. I unfolded it cautiously and read the words twice before sitting down. It was from Karen. Not an apology, exactly, but an admission of sorts. She wrote that things had gotten out of hand, that she had made poor choices under pressure, and that her actions had led to unintended consequences. She blamed the HOA culture for feeding her ego, but she also admitted she had crossed lines. The final sentence struck me most. I can't change what I did, but I can promise I won't do anything like it again. That was it. No signature. No plea for forgiveness. Just a quiet surrender, written in stiff, formal language. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A few days later, moving trucks arrived. Karen was leaving. The house that once hosted fashion shows, wine tastings, and pool parties was now being stripped of furniture, decor, and pride. Rumors swirled. Some said she was moving in with a sister across town. Others said she'd bought a place in a different neighborhood, one with no HOA oversight. One bold theory claimed she was moving to an off-grid ranch in Montana to reconnect with nature and escape social media ridicule. Whatever the truth was, I didn't care. She was gone. And with her, the storm she brought. After Karen's departure, a sense of calm settled over the street. Kids rode bikes freely again. Lawn arguments stopped. The community group chat no longer exploded over birdhouses or grass length. People smiled more. Even Sharon, the former HOA president, reappeared now and then, not as an authority figure but as a regular neighbor walking her dog. I never expected to see her mellow, but sometimes consequences humble even the most stubborn personalities. She greeted me one morning and said, "Guess we all learned something, huh?" I replied, "Better late than never," and we left it at that. Joey and I met one last time by the fence to dismantle what remained of our revenge device. The valve, the tubing, the actuator, it all came up easily. We didn't need it anymore. The war was over, and we had won. As we packed up the last of it, Joey looked at me and said, "You could have gone scorched earth. But you didn't. You just flushed the truth into the open." I laughed and told him, "Sometimes that's all you need. A well-placed truth and a tiny bit of brown water." The best part of it all wasn't the spectacle or the viral fame. It was the restoration. The quiet return to normalcy. The way neighbors talked again, trusted each other again. Even the kids seemed happier. The street had become a neighborhood again, not a battleground for one woman's ego. I went back to gardening, fixing my sprinklers, and finally addressing the leaky kitchen faucet I had ignored through all the chaos. Life moved forward. Steady, simple, and peaceful. Every so often, I'd catch someone new walking by, maybe a family checking out houses for sale, and I'd hear them ask, "Is this the neighborhood where that pool thing happened?" A neighbor would nod and say, "Yep, but don't worry, it's cleaner than ever now." And we'd all share a look, a private acknowledgement that something wild had happened here. Something unforgettable. And yet, we'd come out of it better, tighter, and a little wiser. As for me, I never got a refund on those outrageous water bills, but I didn't need it. The satisfaction of seeing justice play out in real time was worth every dollar. Karen's pool was a monument to excess, deceit, and selfishness, but in the end it became something else entirely. A symbol of what happens when you push too far, lie too loudly, and steal too boldly from someone who knows how to fight back, quietly, precisely, and with just the right amount of pressure. And somewhere out there, maybe on a dusty Montana ranch or in some HOA-less suburb, Karen still tells her version of the story. I'm sure in her mind, she's still the misunderstood hostess who just wanted to throw a good party. But here, where it all went down, we remember the truth. The pool, the pipe, the flip of a switch, and the day the water turned, so did everything else. The Queen of Clean got flushed, and the neighborhood finally got to breathe again.